We sure are happy that you've decided to attend the Growing and Living Conference, and we really are appreciative of Bishop Bill's invitation to us to attend and make this presentation.
Well, we are Bill and Peg White, and we've been married 51 years. We have 5 children and 22 grandchildren, one of which was born this week. So we're pretty happy grandparents right now. We're lifelong members of Pensacola, and we are members of the St. Thomas More Parish in Pensacola. Now, how did we get here? Giving you a talk on the Vatican International Exhibition of the Eucharistic Miracles of the World. Whereas a couple of years ago, probably like you, we had never heard of this. We were going on a trip to Europe, and Bill heard something about 1 or 2 of these miracles, and he suggested, wouldn't you like to go see 1 or 2 of these? And I said, well, sure I would. And wow, little did we know what God had in store for us.
Well, we were able to see a couple of the miracles. One, for example, Lanciano, Italy, that happened in 750 AD, and it was stunning. And a great one in Cascia, Italy. We're going to be talking about some of those a little bit later, but when we got back to the United States after seeing these miracles, we just had to find out more and see whether or not there was some way we could bring those miracles in some form or fashion to our family at home. We did some research, found out that there was a Vatican International Exhibition of Eucharistic Miracles, and it was a copy of it was held by Archangel Radio in Fairhope, Alabama. And they were gracious enough to give us the exhibition, or a copy of it, to take as we wish, and to bring to Pensacola and a few other places. There are 152 approved Eucharistic miracles in the world. This exhibit, the part we can take, is nowhere near that number, but we want to entice you to look into this further and look at all of the Eucharistic miracles that are included in this exhibition.
You see, at the time, we were about to celebrate our 50th anniversary, 2020. And I said to Bill, now wouldn't it be fun to go across the country and see our favorite places and our favorite people? And I could just hear the Lord chuckling now that I know what happened, because He knew we would do exactly that. But we would actually be taking this exhibit to all the churches and schools and retreat centers that we could get into across the country, and even stopping twice for COVID. Over 8,000 people have seen this copy of the exhibit. We want to start out with Carlo Acutis, who was the one that came up with this exhibit. We have a lot of thanks to give this young man. He was born in May of 1991, but only lived for 15 years, dying in 2006 of acute onset of leukemia. Carlo was a very normal young boy. He loved sports, he loved his friends. He was simple, spontaneous, and very likable. But he did differ from the average child in his tremendous faith and love for the Eucharist. He accomplished a great deal in his life, teaching himself a lot of computer things like coding, editing videos, and creating animation as a young teen. He heard about the Eucharistic miracles and began to research them, asking his parents to take him to see many of them. Carlo determined at a young age to live for God. He said, to always be close to Jesus. That's my life plan. He volunteered at Soup Kitchen. He saved his money to buy sleeping bags for the homeless, and he would even bring hot drinks to them at night. But his first love was Jesus in the Eucharist. He said, Jesus is my great friend, and the Eucharist is my highway to heaven. Another of his sayings was, by standing before the Eucharistic Christ, we become holy. And another, the more Eucharist we receive, the more we will become like Jesus, so that on earth we will have a foretaste of heaven. He's known to have told his mother, who was, of course, very upset at him dying such a young age. He said, I'm happy to die because I've lived my life without wasting a minute on those things which do not please God. Though Carlo died at a young age of 15, he left a tremendous legacy in this exhibit of the Eucharistic miracles of the world, which is now gone across the globe. He was beatified and is now Blessed Carlo Acutis in 2020 in Assisi.
So for our presentation here, we thought we'd give you a few favorite highlights from the exhibition that we take around the country ourselves. And the first one you'll see is, well, first, we should start with what Eucharistic miracles are. And I guess you could sum it up by saying they are events surrounding the Eucharist that a church authority confirms that there has been no scientific explanation for. There are other technical points, but I think that sort of sums it up. But one of the things we need to make sure we're clear on is these are not the basis for our faith in the Eucharist or in any other manner. And we're not, as Catholics, required to believe that what they appear to show are true. And yet, there is more evidence here in these Eucharistic miracles that what the Church does teach us is true, that Christ is fully present in the Eucharist, body, blood, soul, and divinity. Well, let's go back to the collection of Eucharistic miracles, and as we see on the screen, and we'll show you here, there's a catalog that shows you the 152 different miracles. We're going to give you some from the exhibition and tell you a little bit about the catalog a little bit later. The first one I want to talk about is the one I mentioned a little bit earlier that we got to see in Lanciano, Italy. We went to see it. It occurred in 750 AD, as I mentioned. Here is a picture of a panel that shows you the Lanciano miracle. It's displayed behind us. And these panels on the exhibition are about 2 foot by 3 foot. They have, as you can see, a lot of colorful photographs, descriptions, and that sort of thing. We're going to give you just a little bit of taste of these as we go. And as I said, the one in Lanciano, Italy, occurred when a priest was saying Mass, but was doubting, having some doubts about whether Jesus was really present in the Eucharist. And when he was saying Mass, suddenly the host that he was using turned to what appeared to be flesh. And the wine, the precious blood, turned to what appeared to be real blood. Of course, that created quite a commotion for him and the other people. Today,
it was really interesting when we went there. We went to the big cathedral thinking that was surely where it was. No. And of course we didn't speak any Italian, so it's quite difficult trying to get the people to tell us, where is this? And it's just so typical of the Lord. It is in the most nondescript little church up a tiny alleyway and absolutely no security whatsoever. It's behind a curtain. You couldn't see it right away, but it was perhaps the most profound experience I have ever had, to be able to see what you're seeing on the screen right now.
Is how it's actually displayed. Yeah. On the top, the host that turned to flesh, and the bottom, a crystal chalice holding, it has now turned into globules. Well, this went on, of course, and was venerated for years and years and years, but then the church authorities back in the 70s decided it would be wise to submit this to some scientific analysis to see if what appears to be there is really what science would show. And they invited a Dr. Eduardo Linoli, a professor of several disciplines, to analyze the relic of the miracles, which he did. And his analysis showed, and you can see a close-up picture of the host that had turned to flesh, and what he saw under microscopic magnification was the indication of muscle tissue. And his analysis actually showed that this was the left ventricle of a heart. And it was sort of astonishing that it could be sliced so delicately and preserved. But one of the things that he found was that there was no preservative in the flesh or in the globules of precious blood. Nothing like salt or anything else that would preserve it or explain why it would stay as it has for over 1,250 years. When he turned to the analysis of the precious blood itself, his analysis, he used various techniques such as electrophoresis to track the proteins, and it determined that it did appear to be normal human blood, not something that was made up. But he also found that the blood type was something specific, a type AB. Now, AB blood, as I understand it, is more rare blood, type of blood, not like O, which is ordinary, like lots of us have, but more rare type of blood, but it's more common in the Middle East. And for those of us who know about it, the Shroud of Turin contains blood and is also blood type AB. These are some sort of astounding things because obviously the people, if people were thinking it was somehow faked, the people back then didn't know what blood types were and had no way of testing it. So you could say, well, that's a coincidence. The more times coincidences occur, the less likely they are coincidences. One of the other miracles that, as I mentioned, that we got to see is the one that occurred in Cascia, Italy. That's where St. Rita is incorrupt. You can go see her, but you can also go see the relics of a miracle that happened there. In that case, a priest was taking Holy Communion to one of the parishioners, but instead of properly placing it in a pyx or some other container, he just threw it in his breviary. When he got to the place where the communicant was to be, he opened his breviary and found blood stains on both pages of his breviary, images of, some people think, is the face of a man. I'm sure that got his attention about how to appropriately handle the Eucharist, but it's a miracle that you can go see today in the bottom of the church, in the basement of the church in Cascia. Another beautiful instance of God just reaching out to us in marvelous ways. Mm-hmm. Well, let's move on. I want to tell you another of the miracles that we need to fast forward from 750 AD into the 20th century for this one and move across the world to Argentina. There have been, as we said, 152 Eucharistic miracles. There are hundreds of them, and they've been occurring in every century, at least since the 750 AD and before that, and in many countries around the world. This one, as I said, occurred in Buenos Aires, Argentina in 1996 when our current Pope was Archbishop there. Well, what happened is in the Church of Santa Maria, a little parish there, it's not something, a big cathedral, a host was found in the back of a church. And as what is frequently done, it was placed in water in the tabernacle to dissolve so it could be appropriately disposed of. But when they came back after some time to check to see if it had dissolved, it hadn't in fact dissolved. It looked bloody, which obviously caught their attention. On the screen now are some close-up pictures of the way that host looked. That certainly drew attention. They photographed it and they didn't know what to really make of it, but eventually, several years later, they submitted it again to scientific analysis. And they invited that same Dr. Edward Linoli, who had examined the host in Lanciano and the blood there. And Dr. Linoli came and said, it probably is heart muscle, somewhat similar to the Lanciano miracle. Well, several years later, they decided to submit it to more analysis, and this time, in 2004, and this is almost 8 years later, they submitted it to a Dr. Frederick Zugibe. That's my best pronunciation. But he's in New York and an eminent pathologist. In fact, he'd written a textbook on forensic pathology. When he looked at it, he didn't know what the source was. They asked him to tell them what it was. And Dr. Zugibe said he certainly could, and in fact, it was heart muscle, very identifiable by its own structures. And he identified it as being from the left ventricle of a heart, just like Lanciano and just like Buenos Aires. This is Buenos Aires. So the similarities he found were staggering for those of us who are ones who tend to believe, but he didn't just look at it with his eyes, he did other analysis, and you can see some photographs in the analysis. But one of the things I find really striking, and I think he did too, was that he saw damage to the heart muscle that he indicated would have come from somebody having very labored breathing, suffering. I think he also indicated that this person might have been hit around the chest. Another thing that he found was presence of white blood cells in this sample. This he found extremely surprising because he said that's an indicator of dynamic activity. What that means is that 8 years after the relic was first found and the sample was presented, it appeared that the heart muscle was still alive. White blood cells, as I understand it, disappear within 15 to 30 minutes after somebody dies. They're carried by the blood. You don't find them in old, dead flesh. You find them in something alive.
Didn't he ask, how did you get this sample?
Well, this is a quote I'm going to say right now. He said, "At the moment you brought me this sample, this heart was alive."
Amazing.
That's enough to take.
That's amazing. And when Bill does tours, when we have the exhibit set up, I always love to watch the people when he gets to this one because they literally fall back and gasp, which I do too every time I hear it again. We serve a living God. We need to understand that, don't we?
Really amazing. Well, the next one we want to talk about also occurred on this side of the world. This one in Mexico in 2006, and a miracle occurred in Tixla, Mexico. There, a nun was giving out communion, and everything was proceeding along regularly when she looked down in the ciborium, and one of the hosts had apparently turned bloody. Of course, that got everybody's attention. As has happened in the other situations, they wisely submitted this to scientific analysis. And the scientific analysis showed something somewhat similar to some of the other ones, but even more interesting. In this case, the blood on the host was found to have been on the top coagulated, but scientific tests indicated that the blood was actually fresh underneath the coagulated blood on the top of the host. And they said it's as if the blood is emanating from the bottom of the host coming to the surface. Now, of course, they've done the normal tests, similar tests to the other ones, and again, blood type AB and heart muscle. At this point, when we're talking to the young kids, and I just say, guess what blood type these are, because every one that we've seen where there's been a disclosure, analysis, and testing for blood type, it's always been blood type AB. Well, let's go back to another one. Fast forward a little bit further, and we're getting closer to the newer ones that we have. And we sort of selected these because they have scientific analysis. There's ones that have happened over the centuries, and there isn't really scientific analysis done, or a relic has been lost or destroyed. But we picked these to highlight because they do have scientific analysis. And if you're into that kind of thing, or you're a little cynical and skeptical like I am, then maybe seeing some scientific analysis might help as far as your understanding. So let's fast forward a little bit and then back to Europe, and this time in Kolka, Poland. That's my best pronunciation, not Polish, but 2008. And as has happened previously, a host was found on the floor. It was placed in water to dissolve But again, after being in the tabernacle for a while, they discovered that the host looked bloody. It hadn't completely dissolved. Obviously, that caught their attention. They took it out and put it on the cloth. It dried, and then eventually they submitted it to scientific analysis. And we've been benefited by that, again, this time by two Polish doctors, professors, one of whom knew where the sample came from, but one who did not. And they had several weeks, I believe, to prepare the protocol that they used to examine it. But once they did, it's almost predictable. When you go through these and you show them, the kids in grade school begin to get the idea pretty quickly. What did they find? Heart muscle. And one of the things they said and demonstrated is heart muscle to the skilled pathologist is very identifiable. It's unique. It doesn't look like other cells. And so the structure is very identifiable to the pathologist. This describes it again, and I believe it's also from the left ventricle. One of the things they noted is it had no natural deterioration that you would expect. The sample was taken. As soon as the sample is taken, there should be a beginning of deterioration. It should be drying, the bacteria should be present, then it starts deteriorating. But they didn't find any deterioration in this sample. But here, in this case, they said, we want to emphasize that there is no way that someone could have come in and placed flesh on this host to create what has happened here. Because the host and flesh interpenetrate each other. They're so intertwined as if the host is actually turning into flesh. It's inseparable. Amazing. Another inexplicable miracle. Now, another little bit of fast forward, and people usually say, well, what's the most recent one we have?
They always want to know.
At least in this exhibition, as far as we know, the ones that have been approved happened in 2013. Again in Poland. It looks like Poland is popular for these types of things, at least. And I would say that's Legnica, Poland, but again, I'm not Polish. Again, a host is found. It's placed in water to dissolve. But you know what the story is coming if you've been paying attention to the other stories. The host didn't dissolve. And when it was examined, it looked bloody. Here are pictures of how it looked. Most of the host did dissolve, but something really bloody was left. And again, they submitted it to scientific analysis, wisely so. In this case, one of the examiners was Dr. Barbara Engel, who is a doctor and cardiologist. She described some of the tests that they ran, but said it came back. It's myocardial tissue. It's heart muscle, again. And the alterations are there. She said it shows alterations that are due, and I quote, from the effects of agony. Amazing.
Wow.
Well, that's all of the ones that we wanted to mention as far as the typical Eucharistic miracles. But we wanted to tell you about a few other ones.
Oh yes, our favorites, because these involve some women who live totally on the Eucharist, and each one for different periods of time. So it's really a good one to tell you about.
You may have heard of some of these, but I find it astounding. We hear that people can live for a little bit of time, most of us only for a fairly short period of time without food, and a shorter period without water. But here are some people that are under the category in the exhibition called Saints, Mystics, and the Eucharist, that only had the Eucharist as their sole sustenance for quite a while. Blessed Alexandrina Maria da Costa was from Portugal. She died in 1955. And here's a picture of her. She seems like a really sweet lady, but she had quite a terrible medical history, lots of trauma and paralysis, and was only able to take the Eucharist. She did so for 13 years. That's all the sustenance she had.
Amazing.
And she's quoted as saying, as a prayer to Jesus, As you are a prisoner in the tabernacle, and I, according to your will, am a prisoner in my bed, we can keep each other company. She had a great devotion and prayer to Jesus for people who are sinners in hopes that they would be saved.
Sounds so much like Carlo when he said when I receive communion, I tell Jesus, have a seat, make yourself at home. That's somebody that has a relationship with the Lord.
Yeah. Well, then another, and this one is sort of somewhat funny. I use that word advisedly, but Teresa Neumann, Germany, she died in 1962. Here's a picture of her. She was a stigmatist too. She had the signs of the stigmata, and she suffered every week, I believe, from about Thursday through Sunday with the passion, the sufferings of Jesus in the Passion. But for a long period in her time, similar to the others, she only was able to have the Eucharist. As you can see, perhaps on the screen, I find this really unusual and interesting and close to funny. The Nazi authorities in World War II, since she didn't need any food, took away her ration card. So since she didn't need food, she didn't need a food card.
Isn't she the one Hitler was afraid of her?
It indicated Hitler was afraid of her, but what they did do, they took away the food card, but they doubled her rations of soap because she bled so much during her Passion. It's sort of interesting that you get a confirmation of something like that from that kind of authority. But apparently she had quite a sense of humor as well.
And she really was an interesting person to read about. She had the gift of knowledge and prophecy. She was really incredible, but like Bill said, a great sense of humor too.
The priest that brought her communion every day said, in her, God's promised word is literally accomplished. My flesh is real food, and my blood is true drink. And she lived on it alone for 36 years. Mm. The last one we want to mention is servant of God Martha Robin, France. She died in 1981. And she was confined to a bed. She had paralysis, and that's why she couldn't eat. She, like some of the others, suffered the passions of Christ on the weekends. And she had a great ministry. She actually founded an outreach with the priest, although she was bedridden. And one of the things that she's quoted as saying is, Jesus in the Eucharist is the one who heals, consoles, sustains, and blesses my everything. And he was her everything. He fed her for 53 years before she died.
That's really something. Mm.
We want to tell you some of our favorites as far as particular ones that our younger patrons enjoy the most. And we enjoy talking to them about the ones where there are animals involved. And in a number of them, the animals play a major role in the Eucharistic miracle. In several of them, animals find a consecrated host that has been lost or hidden. And they do other things that are sort of miraculous and indicate that they've got a pretty good line on what's going on as well. One of my favorites is the story about St. Anthony back in the day, preaching about the real presence of the Eucharist. And apparently there was somebody in his area who was not so convinced and was actually preaching the opposite. As the story goes, as I recall it, the person who was preaching against St. Anthony and the real presence decided to challenge St. Anthony, in a sense, to a duel. He said, let's put this to a test. I have a donkey, and I will starve this donkey for several days, and then I will present the donkey with food, and you present the Eucharist, and we'll see which the donkey chooses. Now, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but from the way I tell it, St. Anthony says, you're on, but let's don't just do it privately. Let's do it in the public square where everybody can watch. So 3 days go by, out comes the donkey. The owner of the donkey comes out with something really tasty and attractive and holds it in front of the donkey. St. Anthony brings the consecrated host in a monstrance and says, kneel before your maker. And the donkey did that. Donkeys and other animals know pretty well about what's going on here. One of our favorite stories, also a favorite for those, is about the fish in Albaraya, Spain.
Oh, I have to tell this one. It's such a fun thing to do with the children. And this one involves a parish priest who took a ciborium, I believe, with about 3 consecrated hosts. He was taking it to sick parishioners. And he went across a small body of water on his donkey, and the donkey stumbled. And the priest fell off, and the ciborium tilted over, and the Eucharist just floated down this river. Well, the poor priest was so shocked and so upset he didn't know what to do. And all of a sudden he heard these fishermen further down the river saying, "Father, come here, come here." And he ran down there, and there were 3 fish with the Eucharist in their mouth, basically standing up on the water. And of course, everyone is so shocked, and the priest runs back to the church, grabs another ciborium, and leans over, and one by one, the fish put the Eucharist in there. So, as you can see, there's a great deal of information in all of these miracles, and we want you to know you can access all these miracles by going on www.therealpresence.org.
Or you can just go to the Carlo Acutis website. Yeah. When I've clicked on Carlo Acutis website, it comes up, and it came up in English, even though it's basically, it was done in Italy.
If you go on The Real Presence, you do have to scroll down to the picture of Jesus that says miracles on it, but you can access them all. We've enjoyed taking this exhibit across the country. We've actually been in 5 states so far. We've met wonderful pastors and sisters, school staff, and met some very faith-filled people, and we just delight in seeing the children's responses to the exhibit. So we'd like to bring this exhibit to your parish or school or retreat center, and we wanted you to see what it looks like. So there it is there before most of the people came in. We put up 50 panels, and we can put it in almost any space you have available. All we need is space. Now we do the rest. People want to know, well, is there a cost? No, there's not. But we do accept donations to help defray expenses. So let me show you a couple of more of these. This is in St. Michael's in Pensacola. We had the pleasure of putting it inside that beautiful basilica for a weekend. And the next one is in Jacksonville. Now I have to stop here and tell you. This was the first place where the school children came. And this little girl comes in, leads the pack in, and I said, "Oh, what grade are you?" She said, "First," and they walked on. I said to Bill, "How are they going to get anything out of this? They can't read these things." He said, "I'm going to follow them around." So he did. He followed them around. He came back. He said, that little girl turned to her friends after looking at 3 or 4 of these panels and said, "Isn't it wonderful, these beautiful miracles that Jesus gave us?" So I never took for granted anymore about the children.
Then I heard another one that said, about the same age, walked through. He said, "I know how it happens. With God, nothing is impossible."
Nothing is impossible.
The little ones get it straight.
Right. And we, of course, this is in
St. Joe
St. Joe, where all of our grandchildren go who live up in South Bend, so that was a real treat for us.
This one is in Phoenix, Arizona.
Phoenix, Arizona, that was a great time. And in Bishop Bill's old parish in Austin, Texas, and that was a delightful time because they all love him and they wanted to talk to us and get their picture made. So this is at the high school in St. Joe High in South Bend. And again, these are the older kids, and it was just awesome to talk to these kids about these miracles. They were so very interested.
And adults like them too.
Yes, of course.
And this is
St.
the St.
Paul's.
Paul's in Pensacola.
St. Paul's. So we hope you've enjoyed this brief introduction to the Eucharistic miracles of the world. We hope you're interested in having this exhibit in your parish or school. Please contact us. There's our contact information. You can email or call, but we do ask you please leave a message. And we just hope that the Lord blesses you even more in His Eucharistic presence. Thank you very much.
God bless you.